If you could predict the future, you'd probably make a lot of money, wouldn't you? You would know, for example, whether Apple was going to go up or down, Microsoft was going to go up or down, Facebook was going to survive, Twitter would thrive. You'd know where to put your money, you'd know where to put your time, you know where to put your effort. You can predict the future, at least to some extent, if you understand how the future works. When Bill Gates was making Microsoft into the tech giant that it is, even though he started off as a college dropout, he understood something about the scope and the role of technology and the curve in which action took place. Every time Microsoft designed a piece of software, the engineers would say, "But Bill, chips aren't fast enough now to run this." And Gates would know that by the time it came to market, they would be. That's because chip speed continues to increase, and it has increased 1.5 times, doubling every 18 months, halving in price since 1965. This is called Moore's Law. What is Moore's Law? Moore's Law is really important for us to understand as video journalists. Now, you might say to yourself, why do I have to know about something as esoteric as Moore's Law? Because our industry, your business, your ability to earn a living now and in the future is entirely at the whim of technology. Luckily for you, that technology is and has been eminently predictable for the last 40-odd years. It's just very few of us have bothered to use this incredibly powerful tool to predict it. Let me explain how Moore's Law works so you'll understand the world in which not only you and I live, but the entire way in which our lives are dictated and what the future will bring. Ever play chess? You probably have at some point, even if you were a geek in high school like I was, or at some point everybody learns how to play chess. Chess was and remains, for some people, a very popular and intellectually stimulating game. The history of chess is shrouded in mystery, but one story says that it was invented in the Persian Empire about 1,200 years ago. At that time, the Shah, or the Emperor of Persia, had two great loves. One was warfare and the other was games. And his vizier came up with something that combined both gameplay and warfare. It was a fascinating game. It was chess. The Shah was so in love with the game that he went to the vizier and said, "I will give you any wish that you have, whatever it is." And the Shah, being the ruler of most of the known world, and certainly the wealthiest ruler ever, controlling a massive empire, was able to grant the vizier whatever he wanted: gold, palaces, women, a governorship, whatever he wanted. The vizier, who some said was a very wise man and who some say was a very stupid man, said to the Shah, "I have only one request." And the Shah said, "Whatever you want." And the vizier said, "I would like you to construct a chessboard and put 1 grain of rice on the first square, double it on the second square, double it again on the third square, all the way down to 64 squares. And the Shah said, "That's all you want?" And the vizier said, "That's all I want." And the Shah said, "Make it so." So the next day, a giant chessboard was erected in the central square of the palace with 64 squares, black and white. And ox carts full of rice began to be taken into the palace. And someone counted out 1 grain, became 2, became 4, became 8, became 16, became 32, became 60, 64, became 128, on and on. 256, 12, 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, 16,000, so and so and so, on and on and on. At some point, the Shah grew tired of this, the counting, and went to sleep. But the counting continued. Now, if you're a mathematician, you have any familiarity at all with the history of microchips and microprocessors, those numbers, that progression, 16, 32K, 64K, 128K, 256, 512, will mean something to you. Because that represents not only grains of rice, but also chip size, as companies like Intel began to double processor speed every 18 months and half the price. By the time you get to the 64th square on the chessboard, you have more than 6 quintillion grains of rice. That's more rice than is in the entire world at any given time. Essentially, the vizier's wish, had the Shah granted it, would have bankrupted the empire and given the vizier complete control over the known world and all its wealth. Needless to say, the Shah wasn't going to do that, so he had the vizier executed instead, which shows you what it is to be either a wise guy or too smart. We don't execute people here for making chips go faster and faster and faster. And every 18 months since 1965, when Gordon Moore, who founded Intel, first came up with this idea called Moore's Law, that every 18 months computer speed, processing speed would double, and every 18 months processing cost would halve, has continued just like those grains of rice on the chessboard. At some point, around 64K, you got fast enough to have calculators. Then it got fast enough to have online video word processing in simple computers like the Apple II. Then you got music for things like iPod. Then you get video. That process will continue for the foreseeable future. Every 18 months, computer processing speed, and making video online digitally is computer processing speed. These are just zeros and ones, but vast numbers of zeros and ones. That's all your video and your audio is. That's why cameras continue to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, smaller and smaller and smaller, and better and better and better. That's why editing software, which used to cost $1 million for an edit suite, continues to get faster and faster and cheaper, so that today, Final Cut, which is the software that we like, but there are many softwares, that sits in a laptop is far more powerful than those giant $1 million edit suites that networks used to have only 20 years ago. This is not an end, this is going to continue. So as we continue to go forward, we can all pretty much know with a fair degree of certainty that cameras will continue to get smaller, more powerful, less expensive, and easier to use. Edit will continue to get smaller, more powerful, less expensive, and easier to use. In the meantime, the demand for video, because screens will be ubiquitous, bandwidth will continue to grow, compression algorithms will get better and better, so the demand for video is going to continue to increase just as the chip size continues to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. That's how you predict the future. And since we can predict the future here, we can know with a fair degree of certainty that the making of video will be A, more and more important, B, more and more necessary, C, easier and easier for people like you to make. This is why the future, an employable future, or a rich future, a dependable future, is in your hands. That's why we're here to help you to do this. We're going to midwife you into this new career, this new life, and this new future. And since we know the future, we know this is going to work.